Hello, I'm Ian Reynolds.
I'm Diego Sanchez.
My name is Kenyon Terrell, and behind the camera we have Manny Martinez. Today we are here in Milwaukee at Cudahy Towers, and we are interviewing Mr. Reuben Harpole.
Kwabena Abishia.
Kwabena
Abishia.
Abishia Harpole. Mr. Harpole, thank you for joining us today for the interview. I'd like to start off with questions about your early life, sir. As I understand it, you've been a citizen of Milwaukee City for since you were born. And I'd like to talk to you and ask if you could describe the memories you remember from your childhood neighborhood, the most vivid ones you have.
The most difficult?
The most vivid.
Well, I grew up with my grandfather and grandmother, and that was tremendous because they took care of us quite well. Lived at 807 West Summer Street in Milwaukee, just south of Walnut Street. And when I was growing up, of course, African Americans didn't hardly live beyond Walnut Street, north of Walnut Street. It was from Wisconsin Avenue, then State Street, and then Valete Street, and then Summers, which is where I lived, and Galena. And that's where mostly all the African Americans lived, except in the early days when they lived on Jones Island. And we lived at 807 West Summer Street, which was right down the street, just east of where they made Wonder Bread and potato chips. And when I'd wake up in the morning, I could smell the bread. So that was a wonderful life. And my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He had a coal business, and he rented bicycles to the students and to the young people in the neighborhood, 25 cents an hour and 50 cents for 3 hours. And then during the time when they would have parades downtown, they would ask my grandfather to have the young people to follow him in his Buick limousine down the street, down Wisconsin Avenue, and they'd have the wheels decorated, and they'd have sailor caps on their head. And it was like 30 or 40 of them, bicycles going down Wisconsin Avenue with my grandfather's Buick limousine. And of course, I would sit in the back. I was about 9 or 10 years old, and my grandfather had a microphone in the back of the car, so I'd love to talk with him and roll the window up in the center between the front seats and the back seat, and I would speak to him through the microphone.
So you guys would throw these festivals and like these parades kind of with the bicycles.
Right.
That was the Johnson's Reynolds Bicycle Shop, correct?
Right, exactly.
Right. And could you tell me why did you guys throw these parades? Like, do you decorate the bicycles?
That was the city threw the parade. It would be the police band or other bands would march, and it'd be for either before Christmas or Thanksgiving or in May, Memorial Day or during the period of time for Veterans Day. So there were a lot of parades during that period of time.
So it sounds like your neighborhood growing up was a very open community. Would you say that is correct?
No, it was mostly African Americans lived together practically during that period of time, and then we never could win the alderman position. That was always taken by somebody from the white community. Meyer, for instance, would handle the aldermanic district from us. Okay. Val Phillips was the first African American to receive an aldermanic position in the city council.
Did the elections interest you growing up? Did the elections interest you growing up?
No.
They weren't.
I was interested in swimming at Lap Park swimming pool and playing basketball on the reservoir parking playground.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, you were a member of the church. You were a member of the
Mount Calvary Holy Church of America.
Yes, and they discouraged you from participating in sports.
Yeah, for sports, yeah.
Why was that?
Well, they believed that it was sinful to compete against other people. They thought you should help other people, not compete. And so I took that, and I used to love to run, but I didn't go out for track because of that. So.
Right. And do you think that this teaching of that you should help people and that you should always try to make people's lives better, do you think that has affected you later in life?
I'll explain something here. The old people, and I knew a lot of folks who were born like in 1800, and so I was young, and I would see these older people walking around, and I'd talk with them. And so they, there was old ministers used to pray. A lot of the ministers couldn't read or write, so they didn't understand the different symbols in the Bible, like Roman numeral one and Roman numeral 2 and Roman numeral 3 or 4, so things like that. And they used to say, they thought the numeral 1 was the I. And they said to read I John 3, I John 4 chapters. And in those chapters it would talk about love. And the first John and the third verse, and the third chapter and the 11th verse talks about love. If you believe in the Lord and God, then you love your neighbors as yourself.
Interesting. Now, speaking of this idea of loving your neighbors as yourself, you had an experience when you were younger living at Mr. Gray's grocery store. Can you tell me about that?
Well, what happened is my father left our home when I was 8 years old, and my mother had to find a place to live because we weren't living with her grandfather at the time, and so there was an apartment in back of the store, Mr. Gray's grocery store, on 8th and Summers, and we got that apartment, and so my mother and my two sisters and I lived in that apartment, right? And that was quite an experience. My grandfather lived across the street at 807 West Summer Street, so we would run over there periodically, during our free time. And then right next door to the Gray's supermarket, grocery store, was a restaurant, and later became a restaurant that was on King Drive. I've forgotten the name of it right now.
Interesting. Now, are there any other stories that you have from your childhood that you would like to share? For example, the story about the coal and how you and your father...
Well, I would help my grandfather with the coal. He'd have to... during that period of time, people would order a ton of coal to last for part of the winter months. And my grandfather had a truck, and we'd go down to a street on... it's where the Milwaukee Brewers, Milwaukee Brewers is on that street, Canal Street. And we'd load the truck with coal and then deliver it to the people in the neighborhood. And then we'd also have some of the coal left over in a coal den right near our home, which was 807 West Summer Street. So if people run out of coal, they could come and buy a bushel of coal for 35 cents.
So we're going to take a quick break for
Okay.
a second, and then we're going to come back after. Mr. Harpole, I'd like to go back for a second and talk to you more about your grandfather. You said that he was an entrepreneur, and you mentioned that he had a Buick limousine.
Right.
Can you tell me more about him? What was he involved in?
Well, he was also worked at the Wisconsin Gray Iron Foundry. He was a crane operator, and he really helped the community out. Whenever there was a job opening, he'd be able to help a lot of the young people, a lot of the people in the community didn't have work. He'd help them get a job. So he was quite a man. He helped his brother and his brother's wives. He was helping the community, helping people in the community, and that's where I get a lot of my stuff from him, watching him. And there was a lot of people that used to stay in our home because they didn't have any place to stay. They'd stay in the basement, or they had rooms upstairs in his house at 807 West Summer Street.
And
Well, he was an excellent role model as a man.
interesting. But your father left when you were younger.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
My father was young, was handsome, and had a head full of hair, and it would in waves, and he would go after women, I guess. And he left my mother and her 3 kids.
When did you last hear from him?
Well, he's deceased now.
And what was the last time that you spoke with him before he passed away?
Well, when he left, he went to Detroit to stay with some of his cousins, relatives in Detroit. And Then he came back to Milwaukee and he lived in an apartment along Walnut Street. And so I had a chance to talk with him periodically there.
Okay.
That's what I learned quite a bit about my family that I didn't know before. Like T. Hardy Harpole. T. Hardy Harpole was like was killed in First World War in France, October 5th, 1918, just before the war ended. And he was buried in France.
Interesting.
And my son had a chance, when he grew up, he wanted to go see his uncle. And so he went over, he saw his grave in France. I've never seen it before. And there's a veteran post named after him called T. Hardy Harpole in Indianapolis.
Interesting. Now, I'd like to switch topics for a second, Mr. Harpole, and talk to you about education and what role that education played in your life when you were younger. As I understand it, some of the schools you went to included 9th Street Elementary School, Roosevelt Junior High, and then later on UW Milwaukee.
North Division High.
North Division High.
And then MATC.
And then MATC.
And then UWM.
So did you enjoy going to school?
Sometimes I did. I enjoyed chemistry and trigonometry, and then algebra later, and geometry.
And geometry. And your career became very involved in education later in life. Was there an experience?
That was by accident.
It was by accident. Interesting.
Well, during the civil rights movement, things were happening. People were protesting and so forth. And then my wife, I had just gotten married August 29th, 1959, and we were living in an apartment at 2958 North 2nd Street, apartment 7, and we watching all of these stuff that was happening all across the country on television. And my wife said, "You have to do something." I said, "Well, do what?" I didn't know what to do. Because I was working in an American Can Company and also at the post office. I had 2 jobs going. And I went over to the Urban League, and the Urban League began to teach me about community organization. And they had about 13 different professors from UWM teaching at the old University of Wisconsin Extension at 929 North 6th Street. And that's where we'd go and learn about community organization. Then the Urban League placed me in charge of Area 7. Area 7 was around 2nd and Burleigh, which was close to where I lived. And not only did I live there, but former Mayor Frank P. Zeidler lived at 21 North 2nd Street, and we talked periodically.
Interesting. I'm going to hand you something now. What I just handed you was the interview that was conducted with the history makers of Milwaukee, where they interviewed you. During that interview, as I understand it, you spoke about a quote: "The purpose for education is to keep the world from cheating you," by Benjamin Mays.
Benjamin Mays.
Yes.
Right.
And
former president of Morehouse, Dr. King's mentor.
Interesting. Now, I want to ask you about that quote. How do you think education has kept you from being cheated, so to speak?
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't kept me from being cheated. But what I've done is I can read things and then understand it. I know how to look up things.
Interesting.
So what I've done is tried to help other young people before they get off into the wrong kinds of things, so that they learn to begin to protect themselves and then their families.
Okay.
That quote is very important to me. When we started the program, we took 105 boys up to Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin at Campion High School. And those young people studied. They were on campus, and not only did they learn about education, they also learned, because there was a basketball clinic up there where we had a lot of famous coaches from various professional basketball teams teaching young people the skills of basketball. And out of that project, when the school closed they sent 40 of the students to a school in California. And my memory is getting short now. Gray was president of the student body at the time, and then he left, and I didn't see him for about 40-some years. And when I did finally see him, I found out that he was an orthopedic surgeon. Not an orthopedic surgeon, but an OBGYN. He helped deliver babies. And he told me that his son was going to Morehouse also to become the same kind of doctor that he is. He lives in West Virginia right now. And then his buddy, Ronald Purvis, has a medical clinic in Meridian, Mississippi. And David Artis went to Yale, got a degree from Yale, then went to Stanford University and got a PhD there, and then spent a year at Oxford, England. And when he came back, Yale and the University of Michigan were fighting for him, and he went to the University of Michigan.
Sorry, we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll come right back to it. Mr. Harpole, I think that your work shows that when you are generous to other people, and that when you have a giving spirit about you, that it can impact people's lives in a very incredible way. And I just wanted to ask, did your growing up with siblings have an impact on you? And if you could talk about your experience growing up with your siblings.
Grew up with my grandfather and grandmother, and I always knew that my grandmother was praying for me. That was always in the back of my mind, so I didn't fear anything. And even when I went to the Army, I didn't fear going to the Army because I knew my grandmother was praying for me. And our church that we attended, Mount Calvary Holy Church of America, the mothers of that church and the old men of the church used to talk with the young people constantly. And I had a spiritual mentor by the name of Mr. Williams, and he worked at Cudahy meat packing company, but he also was a very religious person in our church, and he used to quote scriptures to me periodically, and then he coached me, and I became Sunday school superintendent of the church. And one of the young people that I used to work with at the church is now a bishop on North Port Washington Road.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your experience in the Army. Now I'd like to segue into that experience. After you graduated, you were drafted, correct?
I was drafted, yeah,
in
1956.
In 1956. And you chose to be a conscientious objector.
Yeah.
Now, during this time...
that meant I didn't want to kill anybody.
You didn't want to kill anyone. Mm-hmm. Now, did your religion have anything to do with that?
Yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't me personally. And just like they didn't want me to run track. They didn't want me to kill anybody.
And was this frowned upon by your community, or was it encouraged?
No, everyone knew me, from the neighborhood. And so it wasn't any frowning on it, it's just me.
Now,
the key thing was they allowed me to be myself.
Interesting. Now, as I understand it, you wanted to be a saxophone player as a young man.
Right.
And during the war, you had the opportunity to play saxophone.
Well, what happened was I had two great teachers, and one of them was written up in history, Leonard Gay, who was in the history books as a band director, and he taught me the scales. And then I had another Bert taught me the chords of the saxophone. And so when I went to the service, I wasn't really that good. But when I saw what was going on in Korea, I decided that what I'd do was join the band. So there was a young man there who had just finished Bishop College in Texas and had studied music. And so he sat me down for about 8 hours and took me through 4 years of his learning. And I was so bent on picking up my horn until I learned everything he knew in about 8 hours. And then there was a band on the campus, and I went and joined the band even though I wasn't that good. And I started practicing. And ended up with a combo, five-seat combo, and we played all over Korea and Okinawa and Japan. And in Japan, I had a chance to play with Bob Hope and Les Brown and the Band of Renown. Our group, 5 pieces, went ahead of them.
Now, this is an alto saxophone.
Right.
And was this was the same kind of saxophone that you played
Right.
in front of Bob Hope. Now, could you tell me about your experience in the band? And you talked about Bob Hope.
Well,
Can you tell me about
he
that?
was in that's Tokyo.
Yes, they were talking.
See, I went to Okinawa, I was to South Korea, Okinawa, and Tokyo. But it was a group, 5 of us: a trumpet player, a trombone player, a bass player, and a piano player. And Shep, the piano player, had a 13-key expansion on the piano. And our bass player had played with Abby Lincoln, who was a great singer out of New Jersey. And all of the guys that were on the band were creative. And so they forced me to be creative. And after we got out of the band, out of Korea, I had just gotten married with my wife, and Jesus Urbina, who was from a Hispanic guy who had played with Tito Puente, he had taught me some things. So he called me up, he said, "Hey, Harp." I said, "What?" He said, "We got a gig in Las Vegas, 2 weeks, and we'll be getting $200 a piece a week." I said, "No, man, I just got married." Because when we'd play out in different places, ladies would put money in my horn, in the barrel part of the horn. And so I knew that if I go on the road, my marriage would be wrecked.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to go back to your marriage. As I understand it, you proposed while you were enlisted, correct?
I was in the service. I was already, my wife and I started dating. I was going to school at MATC, and she was going to Marquette University. She was going there because her father didn't want her to go to Creighton, which was in Omaha, Nebraska. And some buddies of mine out of chemistry, I was pretty good at chemistry, so we were playing. The guy said, "Hey, we got a young lady we'd like for you to meet." And they introduced me to her, and we started off and on all while she was in school, just dating, but nothing serious.
I'm sorry, we're gonna just to stop.
Was that the restaurant?
Yes, the lights.
What are they doing?
Who knows?
All right, so when I got called to the Army in 1956, about December, then I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. I was going to be in a medical unit. And so while down there, I got a telephone call, and the guys, guys when they're together, they try to be tough, They said, "Harpole." I said, "What?" They said, "Telephone." So when I got to the telephone, my wife had left Marquette and had gone to law school at Howard University. So when I picked up the phone, she said this to me: "What are you going to do?" And I said, "How'd you get my number?" Because I thought I had gotten away without doing anything, committing anything. So finally, this was February of 1957. The 14th.
It was Valentine's Day, correct?
It was Valentine's Day, yeah. And so I proposed to her over the phone. I told her, "Well, we can't get married until after I get out of Korea." So we got married August 29, 1959, in Cleveland, Ohio.
Now, I'd like to talk about your experience on Fort Sam Houston. Was this where your saxophone was almost stolen, or was that while you were in
No, I was in the service. It was some soldier that tried to steal the horn so he could get some money, but the police of the MPs found it. So I got my horn back, and I was able to practice and play with the group, and I got better and better.
What was going through your mind when you saw that it had been taken?
I was hoping I'd catch it.
And
I was upset, but I figured I'd get it back though.
And during your time in Korea and Tokyo, you didn't have much fighting experience, as it were, correct?
I didn't fight at all.
You didn't fight at all.
No, and I keep from going out on bivouac would be you'd have to sleep outside in the cold and so forth. That's why I picked up the horn, because I played with the band, and so the band didn't have to go out there. Then we were on the radio, and then we'd go to Okinawa, and then we ended up in Tokyo in Japan, and I was playing. We'd go before Bob Hope and Les Brown and the band were around. They were the main attraction, and we just go before them to prepare the audience before they would start. That was quite an experience.
Did you have any one-on-one interaction with Bob Hope?
Who?
Bob Hope?
No, he's a comedian. He couldn't tell me about the saxophone because he knew.
But you played for the radio, correct? You played.
Yeah, they'd ask him to come and play for the radio. Yeah.
Was this during the war or after?
No, there was no war. I was in Korea and there was no war.
I should say.
Huh?
During your service, I should say. Was this during your service or after?
During the service.
It was during the service. Can you tell me about your experience playing on the radio?
Nothing. I just played.
You
just like I would play now. There's no experience to playing on radio. We had to play a solo on the radio. Like when I came back home, I was going to UWM, and I happened to be on the board of the radio station here, and they had a fundraiser going on, and so I said, those of you who would promise to pay some money, I'll go get my horn and play a tune, and I played Moody's Mood for Love, and one of my friends gave $100 to the radio station.
Just to jump back for a second, you said that you happened to be on the board of the radio station.
Not the board, yeah, the board of WWM.
How did you get involved with that?
Well, I was working at the University Extension. I worked with the university for 31 years. So I got involved with a lot of things on the university campus, including the schools of education and school of business, different things. Not that I was the professors, I'm not a professor, I just worked with a lot of professors that were there. The guy I worked with for 31 years was Belden Paulson, who was political sciences, and one of the greatest political sciences in the country. No. If you look him up on the computer, you'd see he was on This Is Your Life program, and went over and saved a lot of people in Italy, and also did a lot of research in Brazil.
I'd like to talk about your experience with Belden Paulson, since you bring it up.
We co-founded the Center for Urban Community Development at University Extension. We actually introduced a lot of things for the first time for the University of Wisconsin. And we were selected nationwide as the finest case study in the country, and was awarded in Chicago. And that's a picture of he and I together.
Yes, I have bookmarked here a page from Notes from the Field, Strategies Towards Cultural Information, and specifically Transcending Symptoms to Community Fundamentals. You authored this with Belden Paulson, the doctor, correct?
No, he's doing this for his grandchildren to let them know what he was involved in, and he and I got involved together at the Harambee Project. And we did a study of the Central City, the first study of its kind in the history of the university, and it was in 1985. And we asked parents that had children between the ages of 12 and 21. We asked them, "What did you want for your kids?" And those parents told us, "We'd like to have our kids to be educated, be able to read." So in 1985, the summer of 1985, we founded a program at the University Extension at 929 North 6th Street, right across the street from ATC, of teaching the kids from that survey. We took 42 of those children. One of the kids, I had to go to the children's home and get him out of jail because he had a knife at somebody. And those kids studied that summer, and there was a lady by the name of Mrs. Patillo, Marva Patillo, who was the wife of Roland Patillo, who was one of the renowned scientists of cancer in the world, and she got some of the wives of the various doctors that in her age bracket to teach at University Extension, and we had a lot of people, about 10 or 20 people from the city who decided to drive their cars and pick up those 42 kids and bring them down to UW Extension at 92906. And then Dick Cudahy, the relative of the Cudahy Towers here, gave me $1,000 to help pay for the food, lunches of the kids. So we bring the kid. We had a team of people picking the young people up in the morning to bring them down to UW Extension at 92906th Street, and then at noon they would go over to the museum and have lunch. And so through that help, it was fantastic.
No, the program that you're talking about now, was this the same
No.
program, the
No.
College Prep Leadership Academy? Or
No,
was
it's
that
not the
something
same.
else?
It was before that.
It was before that.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that briefly?
This program, we found out from a couple of teachers that what a lot of students, well, first of all, there was a teacher at North Division High School that told me, he says, man, I don't know what's happening with these elementary schools. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they come to the 8th grade, to the 9th grade, and they can't read. He said, we can't even teach them. We take us six months sometimes to get them up to stuff so they can read at a 9th grade level. He said, so I don't know what's going on with them. So we started a program called the Central City Teacher Community Project, where we took some of the feeder schools, the middle schools and the elementary schools, and put them together, and we went and got the top teachers at the University of Wisconsin School of Education to work with us during the summer. We raised some money, private money, to help pay their salaries while they were working and teaching. And then from that point on, all kinds of positive things began to happen. The professors wrote about it, and then what we asked the teachers to do when we had them together, about 15 or 20 of them together, we said, we'd like for you to get to know the families of the students that you teach. And so their task was to get to know the families. And so one of the teachers, who was the art teacher, he kept knocking on his parents' door for about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks before finally the lady let him in. She's afraid of him. Big, tall, 6 foot something white dude knocking on the lady's door. And so finally, after she decided to trust him, he took she and her kids to the Milwaukee County Zoo. And so one of the kids got tired, so he had to pick the kid up and hold the kid. And so here's a big, tall white dude with a black woman and her kids walking down in the zoo, and different people are looking at him, want to know whether they're connected or not. And so after he had the kid on his shoulder, he reported back, because all the teachers would report what was going on. He said, when he had the kid up there, he said, oh, the heck with it. And he said, from that point on, he just considered people as human beings and not as black or white. Yeah. And so that turned him around, and he started doing great things afterwards. So that project was great. And then the carpool was terrific. We had lawyers, we had people connected with the foundation of the city, picking up those kids, and they had a chance to get to know them. And out of that program, a lot of the young people went on to do great things.
Now you've impacted.
And then this program happened after Campion High School, where we took 105 boys from the Central City up to Campion High School, which is in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, right where the Mississippi and the Wisconsin River come together. It was on 90 acres of land. And we had about 20 teachers from Milwaukee together with Jesuit teachers that were already connected with the school. And that project proved to be fantastic. We proved that the kids can learn.
And you've had a lot of great impacts on people's lives. And now I'd like to talk about one specific thing, the Helen Bader Foundation. Could you talk to me about your experience there and how you got involved with it?
Well, the president, Dan Bader, had heard from various people in the community that I was someone that he wanted to talk with. And then one day, down at he had an office in the bank building, U.S. Bank building, and I walked in and asked him, what are you doing for African Americans? And he couldn't answer that question at the time. So later, he talked with different people in the community, and they said that he should hire me to help him with the Central City community. So one day he asked me, when I just retired from University of Wisconsin Extension, he asked me if I'd want to start a job with him. And I said, well, I got to finish, because the dean of the School of Education had asked me to work there with him to help work with 2 high schools and middle schools to see if we can do something with the kids in the high school and the middle school. And I said, well, I have to finish this job first before I go work with you. So finally, after I finished with the University of Wisconsin Extension School of Education, I was able to start working with Dan Bader and the Bader Foundation. And he gave me, he said, how would $500,000 be with you? I said, well, yeah, I could use that. And finally, that $500,000 grew to about $3 million. And so we started working with the community, and we had a project that I'm still upset with the city right now for. It's called Central City Teacher Community Project, where we started with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade classes, giving teachers enough money to motivate the kids in those grade level to do their homework. And they do their homework, they get gifts and so forth. And we also even paid half of the salary of a supervisor from the Milwaukee Public Schools. So when the Milwaukee Public Schools administration and the school board didn't pay any attention to us, we had spent about $2 or $3 million. We said, the board said, look, why are we spending all this money with the public schools and they're not showing an interest in this goal? So they stopped it. And that hurt me, because that was a great program.
Thank you for talking about that. Now, you talked about the many programs that you were involved in. I have another page bookmarked. This is from The Greater Together, 100 Years of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation book from 1915 to 2015. There's a page bookmarked with talking about your time at the Helen Bader Foundation. I was wondering if you could talk about that and elaborate. Was this the time at which that you became involved with things like the Black Holocaust?
No,
and things like that.
No, Black Holocaust, that's different. This picture of me in here was there because I used to bug Jim Marks and also Huntington, who was the executive director. They'd always say that they'd look at me and I'd have a proposal in my breast pocket. And when they'd see me coming, they'd start running. So they ended up giving me an award. I gave an award for helping the community out. And I still have friends in the Greater Milwaukee community. So it's been a great experience. I started with a lady who ended up being on the board of General Motors, and then the person that took over from her, I started working with them. And I'd see something that needed to be done in the community, I'd tell them about it, and they'd work on it and do it. So I ended up getting named the Jim Marks Foundation by a group of young people who have their offices at a bank building at 735 North Water. And so this has been a great, these are a lot of my friends here that are here. And you mentioned it, America's Black Holocaust Museum, I'm on the board of that. And Dr. Cameron, I worked with him for about 10 years. I was chairman of the board of America's Black Holocaust Museum. And this little piece of his speech, this is the last speech he gave, and he was honored. He was recommended by Governor Jim Dole, and Tony Brown of Tony Brown's Journal was the keynote speaker at the event. But the person who gave the greatest speech was Dr. Cameron. Dr. Cameron was given an honorary doctorate degree from the University of Wisconsin, like I received an honorary doctorate for my work. And Dr. Cameron was renowned for knowing the history of this country. And I'm going to leave you to copy this book, so I'd like for you to share this, if you can copy it and share it with a lot of your students. This tells you the whole story of how we came to this country and why we're free. If someone would ask you, about the freedom, how would you say that the African Americans were freed? Would it be Juneteenth Day? No, Juneteenth Day took place. That was an executive order by Abraham Lincoln. The real freedom happened on December the 18th, and it was the 13th and 14th Amendment.
It's interesting you talk about our roots in Africa. As I understand it, you traveled to Africa, correct?
Oh yeah.
And you took part in that African-centered adult
Let me explain.
Rites of Passage. Yes.
Dr. Anthony J. Minzer ran the summer prep program at Marquette University High School for many, many years. He was there with Jim Rice, John Weatherall, and himself, and then the Father Bob, who later came down with Alzheimer's. And they ran the program at Marquette, the summer program with the young people, and it's been going on since 1968, averaging 58 boys, where they take in boys at the end of the 6th grade and then work with them in the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And this is 1976. I was in Miami, Florida, and I was with the 85 Beta sorority group, and the husbands of the women that were in 85 Beta, they were called shads. So they were talking about their sons and how the sons were being messed up, getting in trouble, going to jail and so forth. So I came back to Milwaukee and I asked Dr. Minzer, I had worked with him for about 30 years. I asked Dr. Minzer, what do they do in Africa to help the young people become men and women? He said, we had something called a Rites of Passage before the British colonized us. And so he said, give me a couple of weeks and I'll come back. And he showed it, he came back. And over the years, we worked together for 30 some years, he wrote this book. And in the book is all kinds of stuff in it. And the book is not for sale because he has a lot of quotes in there from different writers. And if you write something about someone and you don't give them credit, then they'll charge you. So we started the concept of the Rites of Passage with young people. And we've been doing it for since 1986 with the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And a lot of our young people are just starring all over the United States. And the way it is that every person, every human being has cycles in their lives. Your first cycle is what? Birth. How many months, how long will it take you to be born? About 9 months, right?
Right.
And that's here. Then after your first 9 months, that's in your mother's womb. Then after you come out, then there's a period of time when you're a kid, a child. Then there's childhood for a while. And then when you get up to about 11, 12, about 12 years old, that's another. Then you move up around to about 18, and then that's young adults. Then you move from 18 into manhood. And then from manhood to middle age, and then seniors, and then you're out. Now, if you know about that, your life will be fantastic. Because every human being that's born into the world comes into the world with a purpose and meaning in life. So it's up to you to discover what is your purpose and meaning in life.
Do you think?
And this helps you to do it.
Do you think that you've discovered your meaning in life? Do you think that your rites of passage have been fulfilled?
Almost.
What do you think you still have to do?
Up to me. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for talking about that.
Yeah.
As I understand it, during your time in Africa, you were given a middle name and you were kind of adorned by a chief. Could you talk about that experience?
I went through Rites of Passage myself.
Yes.
And he had to put a sword on each of my shoulders, and he gave me something to eat. And then he named me. See, my name from birth, because every human being that comes into the world, they come into the world either on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And if whatever day you come into the world, there's a meaning for that. My day was Tuesday, and it meant that I was born as an inspirator. But I have to be careful because I make mistakes, and sometimes it could cause my life. So when I was in Africa, the Africans knew we were coming to visit this village, and they beat the drums for 4 hours while we were on the bus traveling from Accra, Africa, into this little village area. So when we got there, then they started beating the drums, and then we kneeled, and he gave me another name. It was called, so I'm Kwabena Reuben Abisia Harpole, which means the connector. And that's what I do. I do connect people. Do any of you know the day of the week that you came in the world?
No, I'm not familiar, but that is interesting, this idea of being a connector. As I understand it, through a lot of your work, you have also been given the nickname The Source, correct?
Right.
And can you tell me what that means to you, and what it means to be the connector, and what it means to be the source?
Well, they not only that, they ordained me as being the paramount chief of Milwaukee, of all of Milwaukee. And they gave me a sword. I had rings and all kinds of stuff in my hand. And I have that sword upstairs in my room. You know. It's called a paramount chief. That's my nickname.
You still have this? I'm sorry. You said you still have the sword.
It's a spear.
It's a spear.
Yeah, long spear. But that's upstairs.
Okay.
So I take pride in that because I run into people in the grocery store who tell me I've helped them. Everywhere. For instance, I don't know, what would you like to become yourself?
Me, I'd like to become an actor.
You know who's the actor in the city?
No. Who?
You ever heard John Ridley?
I have not.
Look him up. They're gonna build a place over here. You know where the Pabst Brewery is?
Yes.
They're gonna have they make films. They're gonna have film offices over there. And he lives in his dad was John Ridley Sr. He's an anthropologist for eyes, you know. And he won an award for 12 years of slavery. And there's a lot of other actors and screamers that came out of Milwaukee.
Interesting. This is a perfect example of how you can connect people and how you create change in your community. For example, another example, you by yourself have raised 758 grants, which totaled to $6.4 million. Is that correct?
I don't know. I didn't count it. Yeah.
Well, that's an impressive feat. And another impressive feat is that you have your own scholarship, the Reuben Harpole Scholarship.
Yeah.
And I have a pamphlet here about the School of Education Reuben K. Harpole Education Scholarship.
And it's because we're looking for African American men to become teachers in elementary schools. And so they say and he's a teacher over at Riverside. He's a great teacher. The young man that was in here.
Yes, you're referring to this ED Line 2017 Enhancing Diversity in Teaching magazine from UW Milwaukee. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
No, he got the Reuben Harpole Scholarship, and he's teaching over at Riverside. And that's what I was hoping that would happen, get more African American men into the classroom.
And how much money does the scholarship award?
I don't know, because that's done by the school itself. But there's about $22,000 that's in there, but they don't get the whole thing. They get something to help them.
And can you tell me about one of your fondest memories from your time at UWM?
Central City Teacher Community Project. We brought in some of the greatest scholars in education from around the United States to Milwaukee to work with our teachers. And at the height of our teaching program at Lincoln High School, we had 235 teachers and administrators there, and we had all these great people talking with them, and it was so powerful. People were standing up, clapping.
That does sound powerful. Now, was it because of this work that you received the Vatican II award in 1993?
That was in church. My church work with, I started working with the Saint Elizabeth, which later became St. Martin de Porres Catholic Church. And then out of that, we worked with the Harpole Community School, which was a Catholic school first, then it became a charter community school. And had a lot of good things that happened out of that. We just finished honoring a young lady that we had a newspaper over there called Harpole Shopper, and I sort of helped them raise the money to keep the newspaper going. And the kids in that program, some of them are teachers, others got their PhDs. One was a captain of the police department in Madison, Wisconsin. Ray was the last name. One is a judge now. Joe Donald is a judge now in Milwaukee. And one of the young ladies went on and got a degree in engineering and was working with Johnson Control and was heading up their offices in California.
And could you put into words why Harambee is so important to you and so important to the Milwaukee community?
It means Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya used that term Harambee to organize all the different tribes to overthrow the British when they had them enslaved. And that it worked. And so whenever there's a tough job to do, if you say the word Harambee, it means let's pull together. Let's fight together, and we'll win.
Now, it's interesting that you talk about the hard times and having to fight against these hard times. That reminds me of the civil disturbance of 1957 that you were
67.
involved in. 67 that you were involved in. Could you talk about that?
I wasn't involved with the thing. I was here when it happened, 30 and 31, July 30 and 31 of 1967. I was here, and it was called civil disturbance by the mayor. The reason why he called it a civil disturbance, I later found out from one of the staff members, was so because had it been classified as a riot, then the insurance companies would not have paid the people who lost their property and so forth there.
And could you describe it?
Oh, it was bad. They were knocking out windows. They knocked out the windows. They started at the attic club on about 4th and Wisconsin Avenue, and they went out, walked up 3rd Street, and they knocked out the window of the Milwaukee Journal, and then they, going all the way up 3rd Street, they knocked out all kinds of windows and fought. A couple of people were shot. One guy became a lawyer, but he was blind, and I had to deal with him a couple of times. And then I started working with the Black Student Union at UWM, and I'm still in touch with some of them, you know. A lot of things happen, good things happen. And some of our people, when they had I don't know if you call it a riot, the people called the Conference of New Africa was in Mississippi. And I knew one of the guys that was down there with him. And so the FBI and the police heard of the New Africa was there, and they thought they were going to try to take over Mississippi. And they gave them 60 seconds to come out of the house, and they wouldn't come out, so they started shooting. Well, then the people that were in the rooms, in the apartment upstairs, they started shooting back, and they knocked off a policeman and a FBI guy. And since I knew one of the young men that was down there, Hakimiana, they asked me to come down and testify in his honor to Jackson, Mississippi. And of course, myself and a lady by the name of Bryant and I went down and testified in the trial. And that was the first time I'd ever had a chance, I'd ever walked through a metal detector, because I didn't know anything about that. And then it was fearful, because I'm in Jackson, Mississippi, and we're in a restaurant, and there's a white professor, law professor from Valparaiso, and myself and the young lady that went down with me, sitting there, and a policeman was walking around in front of us strutting and had a pistol, a white pistol, on his side. And I'm thinking to myself, here I'm in Mississippi, I might have to get into a bar with a fight and stuff. So we were afraid to go to bed that night, because somebody that day that we were there had been shot in Florida.
From that story, I can see that through your life, you've had to deal with a lot of setbacks because of your race and a lot of oppression because of your race. But despite that, you've been able to succeed and you've been able to strive.
Because I don't let anyone define me.
You don't let anyone define you. And I want to explore that a little bit. And I'd like to talk to you about how you tried to define yourself after the war. Jumping back a little bit, as I understand it, you were involved a lot with many great black musicians. Bunky Green, Lou Donalds, Charles Mingus, and Rick Cobbs. Could you talk about some of
And
these
Willie
people?
Pickens.
Could you talk about some of these experiences, specifically how you went to New York and that experience?
Yeah, I was 18 years old. So Willie Pickens and Bunky Green and I went to New York because Bunky and Willie were ready to play and challenge those musicians in New York. And so we got there, we stayed at the YMCA off of 135th and 7th Avenue. And on the corner of 135th and 7th Avenue was Small's Paradise. And this is where a lot of jazz musicians would gather and have a jam session. So we went in there, we thinking we're gonna get in there and challenge with them. So we got in there and they didn't allow us to get on the stage. That was funny, because they didn't want to compete against us. So then we walked the neighborhood and we ran into Lou Donaldson. Lou Donaldson's a great alto player. And while we were talking, he said, Lou said, "Hey, Bunky, how would you like to work with Charlie Mingus?" Bunky said, "Oh yeah, I'll work with him." And when Bunky got a job working with Charlie Mingus, and then Willie Pickens and I had to go home on the train, and we missed the direct flight that train stopped at almost every stop, and so we were freezing inside the train, and we had to use newspaper to keep ourselves warm, to the blankets. And then I went to the kitchen and to the dining room and asked the guy, I said, "Look, can we have something to eat?" The guy said, "What's wrong? You lost all your money playing crap in New York?" We said, "No, we didn't lose it. We just broke." I said, because I was working in the American Can Company, I said, "I'll pay you when I get back home." And he gave us something to eat. And then I sent him a check after I got back home. And then Willie ended up going to Chicago and playing. And last year, he was named the jazz musician of all Chicago. He's the greatest jazz player in Chicago on the piano. And Bunky, we don't know where he is right now, but he's the greatest alto player in the country, probably in the world. He's written up in Downbeat magazine. So if you go on the computer and look up Bunky Green and Downbeat magazine, you'll see it.
Would you say that music has always been a big part of your life?
Say music and prayer.
And
because music, you can express yourself.
right. And you've always been big on expressing yourself, and I think that is highlighted through some of the careers that you've held. Jumping back a little bit, after you came back from the war, you've worked in the Beat newspaper, the Milwaukee Sentinel, the American Can Company, and the Milwaukee Star newspaper. Can you tell me about what drew you to news and what drew you to that field?
For the Bee, I was 12 years old, and there used to be a guy that was the peddler of the Chicago Bee. And my grandmother and mother used to always laugh because when I was working for him, he'd tell me, say, you can get a penny of, the papers cost 10 cents, and I would get a penny from the paper. Then he'd tell me, go over here, there, and they'll buy a paper from you. And so I finally found out that he was lying. And I would go over there, so I told my grandma, I said, I don't pay any attention to him. I found out he was lying. And after that, I respected him a lot, but I knew that I couldn't count on him telling me where to go to sell a paper. So I started selling papers with the Chicago Bee. And then later, I started working for the Milwaukee Star newspaper, and that was by accident because I was playing basketball at the YMCA and I ran into the owner who said, "Hey, how'd you like to work for me?" And I ended up working as a salesperson in advertising. And then I found out that they needed an artist, graphic artist. So I knew of a guy by the name of George Sanders, who was a graphic artist. and I asked him if he'd come over and help us out. And he did. And he was a great graphic artist. Then I went to Marquette's college, Marquette Journalism School, and I asked him if they had somebody there that could help us with writing. And they sent a young lady there. I've forgotten her name right now, and she was fantastic. She actually worked with Lloyd Barbie on the music, which is Milwaukee United School Integration Committee, and in terms of breaking up de facto segregation in Milwaukee.
Could you talk more about that, breaking up the segregation in Milwaukee and your involvement?
It was my involvement until I put the I in music.
Yeah.
But I was selling advertising space in the Milwaukee Star to keep them going. The advertisement took care of their salaries.
Now, you've always had a skill for bringing in money. While you were working for the Milwaukee Star, you were the advertising manager.
And circulation manager.
Yes. And do you think that those skills helped you when you worked for UW Milwaukee? As I understand it, Dr. Belden Paulson asked you to join the UW Extension as faculty, but soon you became so much more, and that was because of your ability to raise money. And can you talk about that experience and you raising money?
I just call it luck, because one time a lady came to me and said she had $50,000 that she wanted me to help her spend. And another time a lady called me up and said she had $12,000 she wanted to give away. And I don't know how that happened. There's another lady, Betty Bostrom, she says, look, I'm going to pay the non-resident tuition fee for students, 4 students, to go to Nicolay High School. Because at that time, and even now, in order to go to a school outside your district, you have to pay non-residents tuition fee. And out of that situation, that came Walter Jenkins, what is it? Daryl Lindsay, and Oprah Winfrey. Those were the four people, the 3 people, and there was one guy that they kicked out because they called him stealing. He was from Fulton Middle School. So it was Walter Jenkins, Daryl Lindsay, and Oprah Winfrey that went to Nicolay from Betty Bostrom. She paid for their non-resident tuition fee.
Now,
and these were people that volunteered to help because they wanted to do something.
Now, you've helped so much with people's lives and the trajectory, and you've helped raise so much money for the Milwaukee community. And it's astonishing because looking back, you came from such humble beginnings of things like Miss Carey and how she ran a gambling house in the neighborhood. Can you talk about that?
Well, Miss Carey, everybody knew about her, and sometimes the detectives would go by her house just deliberately to hear her curse, because she could out-curse anybody in the neighborhood. They'd open up a door and she'd open the screen just a little bit and curse them out. She was right next door to the Old Man Gray's grocery store.
So all your life, you've kind of been surrounded by these influential African-American women. Would you say that is fair to say?
Well, a lot of times, a lot of movie stars used to come to Milwaukee. And of course, they couldn't stay in the various hotels, so they would stay with people in the neighborhood. And they'd be walking the street, and you could see Duke Ellington walking the street. Then I don't have it now, but there was a lady here in Milwaukee named Satin Dow. Satin Dow and La Cricket used to dance, and they were fantastic dancers. And Duke Ellington saw her perform one time, and he named a song after her. So if you go on to the book and look up Satin Dow and Duke Ellington, you'll see it there. We used to have a club here called the Flame, and the Moon Glow.
Do you have any stories
Bill
about
Mosby.
the Flame?
Huh?
Do you have any stories about the Flame?
Well, that's what I just said. Duke Ellington.
Yes.
Mattie Bell Woods. Mattie Bell Woods died at 102 years old, but she danced at the Apollo Theater when she was about 100 years old. Had her own dance in the Apollo Theater in New York. And the reason why she died is because they tried to operate. She's 100 and some years old, and they tried to operate on her at St. Michael's Hospital. She didn't make it after that.
Now, for all the influence that you've had, being honored with the Vatican II Award, being honored with a scholarship with your namesake, perhaps one of the greatest that we haven't mentioned yet is that you have the street named after you in a way, Harpole Street. Could you talk about that?
Well, when they told me that they wanted to do that down at City Hall, John Gerter and the group, I said, well, I'm not dead, man. They said, you don't have to be dead, you have to be 70 years old. So I was over 70 years old when they did that. So you could actually go to the city and ask them what was the background, and they'd probably written up as to why they named it after me.
But could you elaborate here why you...
I didn't have anything to do with the naming.
You didn't have anything to do with it, but can you tell me about the experience in that day and what it felt like being honored?
It was fantastic because they had just promoted me to Paramount Chief, and if you look in the old Milwaukee Community Journal, you'll see pictures of me in the African outfit, garb, and I'm with my mother and my sisters and cousins who came up from Indiana to be with us. So it was a tremendous experience. They had all the publicity and the pictures that were taken. It was just beautiful.
Now, Mr. Harpole, you describe your old neighborhood and the neighborhood that you grew up in. It seems like a loving place full of loving people.
Fantastic. The Bonners family, 8th Street Church of God in Christ. In fact, if you go up to the State Historical Society, and there was a booklet that had the 8th Street Church of God in Christ on the front cover of it, you could probably get a copy of it out of Madison.
And you also had a female pastor, correct? Not at...
Yeah, Mother Evans.
Could you tell me about her?
She was very forthright, brilliant, and her husband was a painter, Elder Evans, and he used to quote the scriptures quite a bit. So she was no nonsense, and the church was very strict.
And
in that church, they had some people that could cook. There's a lady that I talk about, and my wife doesn't like to hear me talk about it because I said that nobody could beat her cooking sweet potato pie. And my wife said, I'd make but Sister Edna, her sweet potato pies were so good, man. It was fantastic. You couldn't believe how good they were. I don't know if you heard about Patti LaBelle, the singer. She made a sweet potato pie with a large grocery store. And when they announced that Patti LaBelle's sweet potato pie, they sold out. And it took them weeks before they got enough sweet potatoes to make more sweet potato pies.
Exactly. Stories like that really show the culture and
it's fantastic
of your community. Now, looking forward to
the big culture was the Haymarket. At the Haymarket, you had Black King's barbecue, you had Speed Queen's barbecue, and you had another one that ended up being on 15th and Center Street, and then later on 2nd and National. And people from the community used to go down there in their cars and then date, get their barbecue and sit there and date at the Haymarket Square.
Right. But looking at the Milwaukee community today, can you give me your thoughts on where we are as a people, and can you give me your thoughts on how we can return to that greatness that Milwaukee's Black community used to have?
Believe in yourself. That's how it can happen. Number 2, people talk about entrepreneurship. There's entrepreneurship that we helped get started. When Gary George became the state senator behind the person that he took his spot. I have a mental problem right now. Anyway, he asked me on 4th and Kilburn, he said, what should I do when I go up to the state office? I said, economic development. So our young people need to get involved with economic development. And so when Gary George went up to Madison, he introduced the bill. A guy by the name of Bob Wynn wrote the language for the state of Wisconsin to give 5% of its budget to minority contractors. And that 5% has been there, and that's 5% of millions of dollars. That if you go up and have a business that you want to apply, you can apply and you can get the contract for 5% above the lowest bidder. And every government office has a supply office, has an office where you can apply for support. And for instance, the city of Milwaukee purchased computers, coffee, all kinds of things that they buy. But they have a commitment to spend so much with minority contractors. But if you never apply, then the other people who are applying will get the contract and you won't get it. And so years later, Senator Proxmire made me the minority business person per year for the I can't think of the name of it right now. But I was there for it because I kept pushing for minority business to get it going.
Well, we can move past that, but I do want to ask you: do you have any success stories of minority businesses? And I know that you've mentored people who have gone on to become sheriffs and things of that nature. But do you have any minority business stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, I worked with Herb Palmer. Herb Palmer was from Jamaica, and he had a degree in engineering, and he had a factory on Hampton, and I worked with him for a while, getting the contracts and so forth, and he was very successful. He was one of 400 engineers to operate, to design and produce the Columbian spaceship. There was only 400 engineers on it. He was one of them, and they built it right down in Cudahy. And at his company, I was able to go to Oshkosh Trucking, and I helped get a whole series of flanges for him to make. But his is a sad story in that he was very successful in working with metals. And he had a contract with Rex Chainbow. Rex Chainbow? And they told him that they were going to give him about $5 million worth of contracts per year. And they had to go out and buy about $3 million worth of steel. And then these young guys who just graduated with their master's degrees and so forth decided to give the contract to somebody else. And that put him out of business. So he's now living in Florida. But it killed his business. It's called Central Manufacturing.
Well, you've kind of been surrounded by a lot of African-American entrepreneurs and academias that have been very astute and very accomplished in their work. For example, your wife went to Howard to study, and your children have been extremely successful. Could you talk about them, and specifically your son's accomplishments?
Well, they started out at Milwaukee Montessori School, and that helped them with the thinking. It was a tremendous school. It was on Valete, about 20-something in Valete. And then they went to Alverno for elementary school there, and that was good. But they couldn't keep up with my son. He'd be leading the other children into different things. He was kind of a born leader. And so we had to take both my son and my daughter out because I wasn't going to leave her there by herself. And we sent them to the school in Racine, which was designed by a famous architect. I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, he went there, and then the teacher told me, said, "Look, I can't answer all the questions of your son." He said, "He asked too many questions. I got all these other kids in the classroom, so I can't answer all his questions." So I had to take him out of the school in Racine and put him into public schools in Milwaukee at Hartford Avenue School. And the teacher asked me, said, "Where has this young man been?" Said he hadn't had any teachers here. And so they started teaching him at Hartford. And then later, he used to go in the library. He used to love to read about the Civil War. And the librarian thought she knew a lot about the Civil War, but they'd get into arguments over different facts about the Civil War. And then I ended up having to take him to Illinois when they had a Civil War action where they'd have soldiers from the northern part and the soldiers from the south acting and so forth. And then it was the hometown of Grant, General Grant. And so he's still very good at understanding what went on with the Civil War and so forth. Okay, and then my daughter, and then they ended up going to Phillips Academy. He went to Phillips Academy, and then my daughter went to another school, another private school. And then they both ended up going to Dartmouth to college. And then Bill Clinton was the keynote speaker at their graduation, the school's graduation when they graduated. And then he went on into the to service. He was like an assistant. What do you call it? Ambassador to Colombia. And then they were bombing about 4 blocks from where he lived. And he said, the heck with this. He went back to school and got his master's in finance and then started working in the financial industry. So he's now in New York. And his wife has just become president of Pomona College in Pomona, California.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your son went on to become the vice president for a while of J.P. Morgan, correct?
Yeah, right. Until Chase bought him out, and he conflicted with with another person. So that's why he's working now where he's looking for people that are into the field. So he travels all over the world.
That's interesting. Well, Mr. Harpole, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back to it.
Okay.
Give us a quick break here.
Make sure you got my
I have it. Oh, do I? Wait, I don't have it open. Sorry about that. Okay, are lights good? Is that closed or is that open? That's good? Okay. All right, let's get into it. Mr. Harpole, we were talking about the future of Milwaukee and the state of the black community in Milwaukee now because you've been heavily involved in it. I want to talk to you about the police and their relationship to the black community and where do you think it is, where do you think it can go, and how would you compare it to the relationship with the police when you were growing up as a young man?
First of all, police brutality had been here for many, many years. I was in the 452nd General Hospital Unit when I came back from the Army, because I thought I'd served the community a little bit more by being a part of the reserve unit. And in there were a number of policemen, and I used to hear them talking about how they would catch somebody trying to run away, and they'd try to jump over the fence and they'd shoot them. And I thought that was kind of odd. And then I finally lived across the street on 19th Place, 4200 block of 19th Place, across the street from a policeman. And he used to tell me about some of the people joined the police force because they want to beat up on people. I mean, they had something inside of them that they want to take advantage of. So one guy was so bad until one day his motorcycle turned over and his head was blown off. So it was almost like he got paid for the way he was treating other people. And then I knew about the different chief of police in Wisconsin before Chief Breyer. It was Chief Johnson and a couple others before him that used to patrol the neighborhood. And when they were during the old period of time, people used to play the numbers and gamble and do a lot of other stuff that weren't exactly legal. And what the policemen would do to try so that they'd get a cut on what was going on, they'd go in front of a person's house that they knew was doing that, and then they would lift the trunk and then turn away so they wouldn't see what was happening, and then they would expect the people to put money in the trunk, And then one day when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was running down the street and a policeman told me, "You almost got shot." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you look like you had done something." I looked like I had done something, so they're going to shoot me for that. So, and this brutality used to go on for years, and there used to be a sheriff, but a judge by the name of Judge, what was his name? He was retired. He had been a Marine, and he was known for messing with people in the elevators. Judge Christopher. And a lot of times the people, when I was driving cab, the guys would get in my cab and say, "Man, don't ever go into that police station." He said, "Because they get you in the elevator and put a towel around their hand and then beat you up." And so we've heard and known about these situations, about the way the policemen would treat people for years. Now, what happened in the Milwaukee, in the African American community while I was growing up, we used to have a gentleman that was a sergeant in the Army, and he was also created a band. So the band will go up and down the street periodically, and different people from the community would be drummers, horn players, and we had a lot of pride, and it would help really. People would look forward to dances, and the girls would be twirling their what do you call it? The little, what do you call
batons.
it? Batons, yeah. And marched up streets. There was a lot of pride. It was fantastic. I remember Donald Byrd, and then the Carrington families, and then a couple others. And this was it always created pride. And then Mary Ellen Shadd, Gerald Jones's mother, ran the Chicago Bee, which was a newspaper. And the newspaper actually helped create the pride that was in the community. And then we had a number of people like Attorney Jim Dorsey, who I later found out was a part owner of the Regal Theater. And that was our theater, where we'd have jazz musicians playing there. We'd have movie stars come and visit there. In fact, I saw Jesse Owens, the track star. I saw him there. He was teaching young people how to be careful about having sex, because you can get diseases and so forth. I was 12 years old when I heard him speak at the Regal Theater. But I found out later that the Regal Theater was owned by a black owner and a Jewish owner, Margolis and Jim Dorsey. And then Walnut Street was our street. We had Babe's Restaurant, Ruth's Restaurant, Deacon Jones' Chicken Shack, Larry's Frozen Custard, and people just to gather around those places and just have fun, watching each other.
It sounds like there were a lot of leaders in your community. I want to talk
about...
Well,
it's the Booker T. Washington YMCA, which is where it came from. Because Charles Johnson, C.L. Johnson, Clarence L. Johnson, was the founder of the Booker T. Washington YMCA, along with Bernice Lindsay, who was the first African-American lady that was in charge of the YWCA, which was on 8th and Clark. And they helped to develop the principles, along with the various ministers and so forth, in our community. And when you see those people, you look at them with great respect.
Do you think that C.T. Vivian reflected those principles?
C.T. Vivian?
Yes.
What did you hear about the C.T. Vivian?
You told me about C.T.
Oh, yeah.
Vivian.
Oh, C.T. Vivian.
No,
he's in Atlanta, Georgia. He's still down there in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was head of the black think tank in Atlanta, Georgia, where all of practically the greatest thinkers in the African American community provided information. And he's a fantastic individual.
Can you talk to me about how you came to meet him and work with him?
He came to Milwaukee and he heard about what we were doing at Campion High School, and we wanted to do that to create a think tank for the Midwest, and where we'd have students, bright students from Chicago, from Minneapolis, and from Milwaukee and St. Louis attending school, and then the great leaders of the thinkers like Dr. King and C.T. Vivian and others who were part of it would come and sit and talk with the students. We couldn't get that going though. We tried, money stopped us.
And the kids that he was trying to help, did that remind you of your experiences at Lapham Park? And like,
Oh yeah, I grew up with them.
yeah. And could you tell me more about your experiences at Lapham Park?
Lapham Park was, it was the guy that was the Lapham Park director, Murphy's his last name. And he was a little short Irish guy. And everybody in the community respected him because we knew that he cared about us. And we had a lot of great musicians, great athletes that came out of the Lapham Park. And this is the place we would go, and I would go there to go swimming, Lapham Park swimming school. And other people would go there playing basketball or baseball. And there was a guy by the name of George Smith. I think if he had been living today, he would be a star quarterback because he could take a football and throw it all the way across Lapham Park. And then there was another family that used to live in an 8-side house off of 4th Street, and they were fantastic baseball players. So we had a lot of people who were great. We used to call a guy by the name of Height, and he could jump over the basketball rim when we were kids. And now it's a big deal, but people can dunk the ball.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you worked with many Jesuits with your time with C.T. Vivian and trying to do that work in
That was
Milwaukee.
at the Campaign High School.
Yes.
Yeah, the Jesuits ran that.
And specifically Father Hilbert.
You're right, he was the founder, he was the president at the time. Father Hilbert was president, and then Father Lucy, who was the brother to Governor Lucy, the governor of Wisconsin, he was the president at the time. He's the one that offered me one of the dorms if I could fill it. And they had 150 rooms in that dorm. And of course I couldn't fill it because what I had planned to do was to have 50 students from Chicago, 50 from Minneapolis, 50 from St. Louis, and 50 from Milwaukee. And well, you know, until I fill up the room, and I would try to get the medical doctors to pay. The cost was only about $400 a year, and I just couldn't get the money at the time.
Interesting.
But out of that group, leaders came, and some of them are still in touch with each other. They have reunions by themselves. No one's organizing, they just do it.
Interesting. Mr. Harpole.
Derwin Gray and Purvis, and then the ones that are here, Coates. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Mr. Harpole,
there's an African expression, and I just like to say it right now, because the things you're asking me, you can do it. And the African expression for that is yumukadu. It means you can do it. So never fear that you can't do something. Oh, because you can. You can do it. Yumukadu.
and do you think that the black community, where we are right now with the police relationships, with poverty, do you think, like you say that term,
Well,
do you think
let me tell you this, the policemen are not all bad.
Exactly.
And we had a guy by the name of Captain Ham, who was with Chief Breyer, when everybody used to hate Breyer, but Captain Ham would work with young people. And then we had a sheriff that was fantastic. He used to let the young people come in and use the gym that the policemen would use, and they developed themselves, and a number of them became policemen.
And that's really what it's all about. I feel like that's what will live on in infamy with your career and all the amazing work that you've done. And as we close out the interview, now I wonder if you can look into the camera and just say to the youth of Milwaukee, not just the black, not just the white, but all youth.
To the youth of Milwaukee, you were born into the world not to fail, but to succeed. There's a purpose and meaning to your life. It's up to you to discover what that is. There is a book that you could read. It's called The Magical Child by Joseph Pierce, Chicago Press. It says a child's mind is the most powerful mind on earth from 7 months in the mother's womb to 8 years old, meaning you can accomplish anything, just like the Gates family has accomplished all kinds of things because they came into the world with a purpose and meaning in their lives, and they're accomplishing it. And you have what it takes to be great. So go ahead become great.
Thank you, Mr. Harpole.